Well, can I take you to a garden? How's that sound? It's not just any garden. It's not like the one you're thinking. You might, if you're Canadian, you might be thinking of Bouchard Gardens. If you're a garden aficionado, you might be thinking of the garden in your house. Beautiful, flowers, perfectly trimmed. I'm not thinking of that kind of garden. I'm thinking of a garden that has a snake in it. And 11 guys dead asleep, and a leader who's about to do the most important thing in his life. The 11 guys had been avid followers of this leader for about 3.5 years, and by now you've figured out the leader is Jesus. The 11 guys asleep are his disciples. He's about to be killed, but that's why he came. He's at the critical point in his leadership journey, and he prays in the darkness while his followers are dead asleep. Does that sound at all like your leadership journey? There's these moments when something really important is about to happen, but there's nobody around you. That's part of why Convene exists. That's part of why the Master's Program exists, because going it alone is not a great idea. Leadership is a team sport. Well, I don't know about you, but the prayer that I would pray at that time in my life when I knew that everything is about to end might be the most important prayer I'd ever pray. And after I died, if you read that prayer, you might have some pretty deep insight into me. Does it sound like something you'd like to delve into for a few minutes? We're going to jump in and say, what can we learn from the last thing that Jesus prayed with these guys? And I don't want to think of it just as a prayer, but it's more like a culminating statement. It's this pièce de la résistance, this thing that is the sine qua non of his life. Jesus, just like you would, reflects on his mission, on his purpose, and here's essentially what he said. I came, I showed them you, and I'm out of here. I came into the world, I did the mission that you said that I was going to do. I showed them you, and I'm out of here. Let me read you a little bit of the prayer. Jesus said these things, then raising his eyes in prayer, he said, Father, it's time. Display the splendor of your Son, so the Son in turn may show your bright splendor. And now I'll skip through some of the prayer and just read some of the highlights. That they may know you. Sort of getting some inklings of mission. I spelled out your character in detail to the men and women you gave me. The message you gave me, I gave to them. They took it. They were convinced. They're yours by right, and my life is on display in them. They'll continue in the world, but I'm returning to you. I gave them your word. Make them holy, consecrated. In the same way you gave me a mission, I gave them a mission. I want that the world might believe in you. So there it is again. I came into the world. I accomplished the mission you sent me. I showed them you, and I'm out of here. To which you might say, what does that have anything to do with my leadership? Well, I think it has everything to do with your leadership, because it's that prayer, again, that time when Jesus is about to be gone. And so I think it's important that he said, the most important thing of all the things he had done was people. I mean, think about it. He had done miracles. He ran a carpenter shop. He stopped the wind and waves, argued with religious leaders, won some battles, lost some battles, got in some pretty big trouble. And at the end of the day, the people who he was closest to, the ones he shared a room with, the ones he walked a dusty road with, the ones he ate with, planned with, got in trouble with, that's the ones he's praying about. He's certainly not saying, listen, could somebody get me my iPad so I could back it up one more time? I'm not sure it's syncing to the cloud. He's saying, I care about the people you gave me. Do you show God to the people you work with? Or do you just work with them? I think God has to be revealed in the workplace not just at church. 80% of the world is not in church. The Barna stats right now, over the last few decades, have gone from 40% of people in church to 17%. So most of the people that we think should go to church or we should bring to church actually probably see you as the person they can find hope and meaning and purpose. Remember that little poem that you used to do as a kid? I don't know about you, but something like, this is the church, this is the steeple, open the doors and see all the people. Anybody ever do that? I think the 21st century version of that is more like, here's the doors and there is no steeple, because we're all in big box churches now. Open the doors and there's not too many people. People are not coming to faith in North America like they were, and they're not attending church like they were. The culture is anti-God, anti-religion, and on Sunday it's about baseball, football, golf, and cleaning your garage. There is one Mormon family in my neighborhood, and they walk to church every Sunday. And it's the only people on our street that I think go to church besides us. Well, I've got a news flash for you. It's great news that people are not in church, because the great news is they're in your business. And when David Ulrich comes and shares with us on Friday, he's going to tell us that the book that he wrote, I'll save you, you should still buy it, but I'll save you reading the deep, deep, deep details of it. After 20 years of research, why do people come to work? Meaning. They want meaning from you. They want to find hope and purpose. So your job, my job, is to imitate the leadership practices of Jesus when we work with people and do life together, so that when all the toys go back in the box and it's all over, you can do more than just say, well, we work together. And on the middle of your table, you'll see this little balance beam, and there's a big one up here, and people on one side, excellence there in the middle, profit on the top. All very important. I mean, if you don't have profit, you don't have a company to honor God. So all these things really matter, but Jesus is saying, he didn't pray about the activities of his life. He prayed for the people that he was spending time with. So how do you raise the cross at the center of the marketplace? How do you raise the question of God? Those are questions we have to struggle with, because we don't want to come to the end of a year or two and say that we just worked together. We just improved our bottom line. That's a good thing. We just built an excellent product. That's a good thing. We just kind of loved on each other. That's a good thing. But Jesus says at the end of his life, when it's all over and everything's about to go back in the box, I showed them you. I showed them you. And I think that's what we need to do as leaders. So just a few questions to keep us thinking. How do you love people? How do you see them? How do you touch them? Do you know them? Do you send all your profit to foreign missions, but you don't use any of the profit in your business so that the people that you serve can be served better? Ultimately, when it's all over, you want to say, I showed them you. Peter Drucker talked to Bob Buford 6 weeks before he died, and I need to be real careful with my facts here, because Joe Massarello is over here somewhere, who spent 26 years down the hall from Peter Drucker. But he wrote in his book that 6 weeks before Peter died, Bob Buford was in a conversation with him and said, what would you like to be remembered for? And Peter Drucker, the person who we all revere and have read all the books about leadership and management, said, I don't want to be remembered for just my books. Oh my gosh, the thing that the world says is the most important thing that you do is the thing you say you don't want to be remembered for. It'd be like me saying at this juncture in my life, I don't want to be remembered for being the CEO of Convene. Peter Drucker said to Bob Buford, the work I did with people is what I want to be remembered for. Only people will last. And a conversation that he had with Dr. Massarello at Claremont, He said he was so excited that he got to spend time with Joe's son for 3 hours helping him figure out his life. Oh my gosh, if you could spend 3 hours with Peter Drucker as a 20-something-year-old to figure out your life, that's like magical. That's what he wanted to be remembered for. And then Drucker went on to say, the most durable organizations develop their people intellectually and morally. So the company is a place to develop moral character. Well, what does that look like in real life with a company? Can I read you a little story from not too many days ago in the Washington Post? Matthew Spence. Anybody ever heard of Matthew Spence? Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Middle East Policy, 2012 to 2015. He wrote in the op-ed piece in the Washington Post these words: the distance from my church to my office at the Pentagon was just over 5 miles. But for most of the time that I was serving in government, it might as well have been 5,000. On Sunday mornings, I prayed for peace. I contributed to the collection basket and asked God to help Syrians fleeing from their homes in the land of the Bible. When church was done, I went back to planning for war. As Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, my responsibility included evaluating troop deployments and missile strikes in the very places where biblical scripture is set. My office on the 5th floor of the Pentagon was this super secure place. And he talks about how he had to check everything he had, his iPhone, his BlackBerry, his all manner of things that he was carrying with him. But he said, I checked my religion at the door too. I felt inappropriate to broadcast my Christianity when we were talking about hard-nosed questions of national security. One day I went to dinner with some friends. Does that sound like community to you? Does that sound like a master's program group, a convened group, not going it alone? I went to dinner with some friends. They helped me start to think of myself as a Christian in the Pentagon. I realized I could do far more for these refugees from my position in the Pentagon than I could with my modest contribution to the offering basket at church. So I got my colleagues together. How'd you like it if this was your set of colleagues? I got my colleagues together from the State Department Human Rights Bureau, the U.S. Agency for International Development, an outside human rights group, I'd love to be those guys, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Wow. And we talked about how we could better support each other, and we went to visit refugees in Jordan and Syria. And our team figured out how to educate their children, get jobs for men in the camp, use military cargo planes to deliver food and other assistance. And my faith gave me the discipline and courage to question my actions and do more. What was he doing? I think he was raising the question of God. I think he was raising the cross at the center of not the marketplace necessarily, but the Pentagon, which was the work in the world. If you were Buck Knives, I've got a little Buck Knives thing over here that I forgot to bring up. How many have heard of Buck Knives? So this is a little buck knife, and when you buy this thing at the sporting goods store or on Amazon, you get this great knife, and apparently they're the best in the world. But kind of in the little box is this little card. So you pull this baby out, and it says, this knife is guaranteed forever. Well, that's a pretty good knife. If you have a repair you need, you just send it in, and they send you another one. This is the back of the card. If this is your first buck knife, welcome aboard. Now that you're family, maybe you want to know a little bit about our family. From the beginning, we determined God was our senior partner. Each knife has to reflect the integrity of management. Sometimes we fail, but because we're human, we find it imperative to do our work to make it right. By the way, if any of you are troubled or perplexed and looking for answers, may we invite you to look to God who loves you. Signed, Chuck Buck, owner, chairman founder of Buck Knives. What could you do with your company? I got some wisdom teeth pulled out one time, and when I woke up, I had this letter in my pocket from the dentist that said, I didn't get a chance to talk to you very much while I worked on you, but I want to tell you about the God I serve. Wow. The Pentagon, Buck Knives, and my dentist all have something in common. They wanted to show God to the world, not just do the work. Well, there's a music video that we show sometimes in Convene. It's a great music video. It shows a woman who failed morally, and she's pretty sad about it, and she's walking around the next day very forlorn, depressed, and she goes to church. She works in a restaurant. She goes to church. As she goes to church, everybody starts kind of shunning her. We don't want to talk to you. We know what happened last night after the bar. People texted us. They told us. The refrain in the music video says this. I won't sing it, don't worry. It all happened in the shadow of the steeple. In the shadow of the steeple. And I used to cry a lot in that video, because that's kind of what I do. But then it hit me like a ton of bricks the last time I watched that video. I probably watched it like 25 times in my Convene decade. And it finally hit me. It didn't just happen in the shadow of the steeple. In fact, the only thing that happened in the shadow of the steeple is she tried to go to church and everybody shunned her and she turned around and got back in her car. It happened in the shadow of the restaurant because she went to work the next day, and don't you think the guy who was her boss might have noticed the difference? It happened in the shadow of the company. How do you raise the question of God? How do you raise the cross at the center of the marketplace? When you work and lead your company, how do you pull back the curtains and provide meaning and purpose for those people? Buck Knives does it really well. The guy at the Pentagon figured it out. My dentist, 25 years ago, figured it out. How about your company? Well, I have one more question. Who's going to be the president of the United States on January 20th when they're sworn in? Don't raise your hand and don't shout out your party. Whether it's Hillary, Cruz, Trump, Kasich, or some other name, I've got news for you. You will still be the CEO of your firm on January 21st. And all the people who work for you are going to walk in the door, and it's going to be another day of doing business, and they're going to look to you, and they're going to say, here I am. I'm looking for meaning. I'm looking for hope. I'm looking for purpose. My prayer for you is that you'll give it to them, along with a big dose of God, because that's what Jesus did when the toys were all ready to go back in the box. He said, I showed them you. That's what we want to do.